expanding Operation Legend. The expansion includes plans to deploy 200 agents to Chicago and another 35 to Albuquerque, New Mexico. More cities could potentially follow. The White House contends the agents will help crack down on violent crime and are not tasked with cracking down on protests. Let us bring in New Mexico's Secretary of State, Maggie Toulouse Oliver. Madam Secretary, thank you very much for being here. The White House and the Justice Department are contending that your city, Albuquerque in your state, needs these federal forces because of rising crime. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's deeply concerning for a number of reasons. First and foremost, this action is completely unprecedented. Sending federal forces into a locally governed city when you do not have the cooperation of local election officials is deeply concerning. And secondly, this is a potential threat to our democracy, not only for the ability of citizens to be able to get out and peacefully protest and raise their voices regarding whatever issue is concerning them, but the entrance of these forces into Albuquerque, which is my hometown, so that's fine, we can say that, is also probably going to actually create the kind of, or recreate the kind of civil unrest that we did see earlier this year. So it is actually going to have what I believe is probably an intended effect to really recreate that level of civil unrest. So it's very deeply concerning for a number of reasons.
So do you think this is politically motivated? We've had a number of guests on in Oregon. There's also Tom Ridge, who was on earlier this morning with my colleague Stephanie Rule, saying that this is politically motivated and it has to do with the president's reelection.
Well, unfortunately, that wouldn't surprise me, and let me tell you why. Albuquerque has been dealing with a crime problem for a number of years, and in fact, the ostensible reason for sending in the troops now pertains to an agreement that was reached with the federal government well over a year ago. And of course, now we're about 5 days before the 100th day before Election Day, right, when the campaign really kicks in. And so as Secretary of State and the chief election official for the state, I have to be really tuned into and concerned about what the potential impacts are on our election of this activity. And my concern is not only that this is potentially politically motivated and for the purposes of a political campaign, but that these federal agents, without accountability, without a timeline for understanding how long they will be here, could potentially be here that in a way that could intimidate or otherwise outside affect our election here in New Mexico. And that is what is most deeply concerning to me right now.
Well, explain to me why you think it's going to affect the election, so expand on that.
Sure. So the reality is right now it's a completely untransparent and unaccountable process that's going on. We've been given 3 reasons all within the last week about why these federal agents are being deployed to these cities that are largely urban and largely made up of people of color. And so we've heard first that it was to quell the unrest, we heard second that it was to protect federal buildings, and now we've had a third reason, which has to do with crime more generally. But the problem is we don't know when these troops are going to leave. There is no timeline, there is no clear communication from the federal government about exactly what they are here to do, whether or not their mission could change, and whether or not they will be here very short term or for the long term. And as we approach the election, again, in just about 105 days from today, if they are still here, who is to say whether or not these agents could potentially be used to intimidate or otherwise disturb the election process while they're here? And those are the kinds of concerns that I, as a state election official, have to be thinking about. We cannot have that kind of activity that would disrupt or otherwise derail our democratic processes here in the state.
Interesting. New Mexico Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse Oliver, thank you very much for joining us. And there's a little bit of breaking news we want to update you on. The Department of Justice